Next on Unsolved Mysteries. When a woman is pulled from a fiery car crash, she begins a lifelong search to find the men who saved her. He was a Little League umpire who attended church on Sunday. But he was also a ruthless mob boss wanted for robbery, extortion, and murder. A doctor is sentenced to 20 years for murdering his wife. But evidence suggests that he wasn't at the murder scene when the fatal shots were fired. And police need your help in tracking down 2 robbers who shot 7 witnesses in cold blood. Join us for these 5 compelling cases. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Chicago, Illinois. Just a few days before Christmas in 1967, a 41-year-old physician, John Branion, and his son Joby arrive home to pick up John's wife, Donna. The family was planning to go gift shopping together.
Joby and I returned from nursery school and went into the house. And the first thing that struck me was all the lights were on and the 2 television sets were on. And I called out to Donna. I got no answer. And then when I got to the kitchen, I looked to the right and I could see feet, legs really sticking out of the utility room. And she was dead. She wasn't breathing. Her legs were askew, and her skirt was kind of rookered up over her legs. I switched off the light and reached around and grabbed Joby and ran out of the back of the house.
Dr. Branion immediately called the police. 5 months later, he was convicted of first-degree murder and given a sentence of 20 to 30 years in prison. But John Branion always maintained that he was innocent.
I couldn't murder the mother of my children. I couldn't murder my high school sweetheart. Donna and I had known each other since the age of 14. I didn't murder her.
I think it was extremely unfair. I feel that it was a setup. My father was railroaded because he didn't kill my mother.
I think he's innocent because the evidence shows that he could not have physically been there at the time these events were going on.
I think the jury was emotionally caught up in the case and just forgot or didn't pay attention to the evidence that overwhelmingly proved that John couldn't have been the killer.
John Branion was the son of a prominent attorney and worked at a community clinic. At one time, he was the personal physician to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Nothing about his life could have predicted the events of December 22nd, 1967. The Chicago police arrived at the Branion home after being called by John.
You noticed anything missing, anything that might have been taken from the apartment?
Investigators found 4 shell casings from a 9mm gun that was next to Donna's body.
Yes.
John was a gun collector and says that the police asked him for any weapon in his collection that could have fired a 9mm bullet. He gave them a Luger pistol.
Wait, Dr. Branion. Let me get the gun.
Police determined that the gun had not been fired recently. They later claimed that John had denied owning any other gun capable of firing 9mm bullets.
Have a seat here, gentlemen.
That same evening at the police station, John gave detectives his alibi. John told police that he had left the clinic where he worked at 11:30 a.m.
Morning. Good. Listen, I'm on my way to pick up Joby. I won't be back anymore this afternoon. Merry Christmas.
He then drove to his 4-year-old son's nursery school to pick him up.
Well, here's your coat.
After leaving the school, they went to see his wife's cousin, Maxine Brown, to meet her for lunch.
Ready to go?
Oh, goodness, I can't go.
But she had to cancel. John told police that he then went home, and that's when he discovered his wife's body.
Dr. Branion, did you submit to a lie detector test?
John, I don't think that's such a good idea.
No, but I would like to have a nitrate test, though.
We don't have the chemical.
A nitrate test could have determined whether he had fired a gun, but the Chicago police were unable to conduct the test. That night, John was released without being charged. 1 month later, the police showed up at John's clinic.
Dr. Branion, you're under arrest for the murder of your wife. You'll have to come with us right now.
I think that the police were under a great deal of pressure from the black press at the time. And I think they saw a chance because 85% of murders are committed by either the family or friends, close friends. They saw a chance to arrest me. And they did. I don't think they thought they were going to convict me, but they arrested me anyway.
John Branion's trial was set to begin in Chicago during May of 1968. Dr. Martin Luther King had been assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, only 1 month earlier. In Chicago, as in many other American cities, the murder of Dr. King triggered days of violent race riots. It was in this charged atmosphere that the trial of John Branion began.
Would you state your name, please, sir?
Only one of Branion's jurors was African American. Although the murder weapon was never found, prosecutors claimed that the bullets that killed Donna could have been fired from a Walther PPK. John had a Walther in his collection, but police said that he denied owning one.
Detective testified. They went back to him and said, "Do you have a Walther PPK?" And he said, "No, he never had one." And it turned out that he had a Walther PPK had been sold about a year before to a man named Hooks, who was one of the good friends of Dr. Branion. Police then went to Hooks and asked him where his gun was, and he said, no, he bought that gun for Branion as a Christmas present the year before.
Donna's brother, Nelson Brown, was among those who testified at the trial. Brown claimed that on the day that Donna was murdered, John had told him that the Walther PPK had been stolen from his bedside table.
There were 2 guns missing. One was a PPK and the other was a collector's item worth.
John said that during the confusion following his wife's death, he did not notice that the gun was missing.
Show you now that which has been marked.
Prosecutors introduced additional evidence. They said that the 4 shell casings that were found by Donna's body had come from a box of bullets that they found when they searched John's closet. 4 shells were missing from that same box. Finally, prosecutors claimed that John had a motive for wanting his wife dead. For 6 years, he had been having a romantic affair with a nurse at his clinic named Shirley Hudson. His wife knew about the affair, but they decided not to divorce.
Our theory at the trial was that it was planned for why that day we don't know, to kill his wife, and that he was going to leave the hospital, come home and kill her, do it silently. When that didn't work, he used the gun. Then pick up his son at school, then pick up Maxine for the luncheon date that was made at the very last minute the night before. Have lunch, have an alibi for the period of time involved, and then have either someone or himself find the body and have a very good alibi.
At the trial, prosecutors produced a motive for the murder, as well as physical evidence that suggested that John was guilty. But then, the trial took a surprising turn.
While you were putting away the groceries, then it happened.
Coming up, one of John's neighbors provides strong testimony that he is innocent. In December of 1967, physician John Branion had told police that he found his wife murdered in their Chicago home. But ultimately, the police arrested him for the crime. John's defense rested largely on the time frame of events on the day of the murder. John claimed that the prosecution's scenario was impossible. It required that he be in two places at the same time.
Mrs. Kentrop, when you got home, did you have occasion to look at your clock?
Yes.
John's alibi was confirmed when his next-door neighbor testified that she heard gunshots at 11:20 a.m., while John was still at his clinic.
If the Dr. Branion left the hospital at 11:30, and I heard the shots at 11:20, and I'm sure of it. I was sure then, and I'm sure now, that it's impossible for him to shoot his wife, to be there at that time.
When you heard those sounds, while you were putting away the...
However, this testimony had little impact on the jury. The prosecution still contended that the murder took place after John left his clinic. Police testified that they had driven and timed John's route on the morning of the murder and had determined that he did, in fact, have just enough time to kill his wife before he picked up his son. John's defense challenged this timetable.
By the way, officer, when you arrived at the nursery school, whose little boy did you use?
I don't understand your question, sir.
Well, I assume that you went to the nursery school to cover some time about checking on a kid. Now, how much time did you allow for him to pick up his son from the nursery school?
We allowed no time for that.
You didn't allow that?
I can remember feeling a chill in the courtroom when he said this. In that you are moving a lot slower when you've got a child in tow than when you're by yourself. So I thought that was an effective point. The other point is, would he walk into the house knowing his wife was dead with the kid? That's a shocking thing to see if he knew it had happened. So I thought those were the strong points they had going for them.
After deliberating for 8 hours, the jury reached its verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, John Branion, Jr., guilty in manner and form as charged in the indictment.
When the judge said I was guilty, I felt hollow. But I know what I did do. I remember kind of sticking my head up. I don't know why, but I remember that. I did that. I know my shoulders got a little straighter. But it certainly hurt when he said that. It really hurt.
John was free on bail for 3 years while he appealed his verdict. During this time, he married his former girlfriend, Shirley Hudson.
I could not desert him, as people were beginning to do. He was a walking shell. He loved both of us. He loved Donna and he loved me.
In April of 1971, John's appeal was denied and he was ordered to begin serving his 20 to 30-year sentence. A few days later, after the Supreme Court declined to hear his case, John jumped bail and left the country. He lived in Africa for 12 years before he was captured and brought back to Illinois to serve his sentence.
An innocent person should be found innocent in this country. We've been taught that ever since we were kids. So because of that, I had to flee because I couldn't get justice anywhere else. The evidence against me proves that I couldn't have done the crime, yet I'm here.
We printed up the crime scene photos from the negatives for me to look at. Tony?
Anthony D'Amato, a prominent law professor from Northwestern University, and his wife, author Barbara D'Amato, decided to take on John's case. They claim that by reconstructing the events that took place on the morning of the murder, it can be proven that John did not shoot his wife.
The fact is that when his wife was murdered, he was 1.5 miles away treating patients in a hospital, and that's proven. That's a fact. So there's no legal rule whatsoever that says an innocent man has to stay in prison.
Because no one can prove that the fatal shots were fired at exactly 11:20, it's possible that Donna was murdered later. John's guilt or innocence seems to rest on the 10-minute window between 11:30, when he left his clinic, and the time he arrived at the school to pick up his son. The trial focused on these details. John spent the morning of December 22nd at his clinic, where he saw 14 different patients.
4 times a day.
At around 11:30, he left the clinic located here and stopped outside to talk with the hospital's administrator. He was next seen by a teacher at his son's nursery school, here, approximately 10 minutes later. In order to murder Donna, John would have had to drive home, shoot his wife, and then race back to his son's school, all in less than 10 minutes.
No, there's no way the police could have made this in 6 minutes. The police testified that they got it down as low as 6 minutes, but they also said that sometimes it took them 12 minutes. Well, that's a huge disparity between 6 and 12. And I just wonder how they could have pulled off that 6 minutes. And they certainly couldn't have done it at a time when there were other cars on the street or pedestrians or snow or anything else like the conditions that John Branion had to drive it in.
Out of the bedroom and around the corner.
More evidence that John could not have shot his wife came when the D'Amatos consulted pathologist Dr. Douglas Shanklin. Dr. Shanklin believes that he can prove that Donna Branion was assaulted at least a half hour before John had even begun to drive home.
It's very important to note that there were bruises and other marks on her body, the most particular of which is a groove in her neck. It was a very deep groove that began in the anterior neck and moved laterally and then disappeared behind, as though somebody was standing in back with a taut cord, not strong enough to strangle a person, but strong enough to hold them, to move their body as you wish them to move, and to restrain them from escape. And of course, as soon as he was shot and the cord was released, this groove stayed there. It's not going to continue to form after death because of the loss of circulation. It takes at least 15 minutes for such a groove to be formed, and possibly longer. So you've got a minimum of 15 minutes before the gun is used. The latest time and testimony for those sounds was approximately 11:25. So that pushes the beginning of the cord around the neck 15 minutes earlier, and seems to me that the crime began probably around 11 o'clock or a few minutes before that. I think Dr. Branion is innocent of this crime because there were 2 people at least involved, one of whom held the victim for a period of time but could not have shot at the same time. Bang, bang, bang. She falls. So there had to be 2 parties to the final action of this scenario.
By 1989, John and the D'Amatos had exhausted all their appeals. John's only hope was clemency from the governor of Illinois. On July 4th, 1990, John Branion was admitted to the hospital after doctors discovered that he had a brain tumor.
In August of that year, the governor of Illinois granted clemency to Branion in consideration of his failing health. John Branion died 1 month later.
Coming up, the search for 2 robbers who killed 4 people in the holdup of a bowling alley. And later, a cold-blooded mob boss orders his henchmen to shoot patrons of a rival business. Las Cruces, New Mexico. 8 a.m., an hour before opening time at a local bowling alley. The cook is in the kitchen preparing for the lunch hour rush. The day manager, Stephanie, is adding up the previous night's receipts. Her 12-year-old daughter, Melissa, and Melissa's friend, Amy, have come with her to the office.
This is all done. Come with me.
At around 8:20, the cook is surprised in the kitchen by a stranger with a pistol. He forces her towards the office where Stephanie and the girls are being held by a second gunman.
As I went in the office, I saw Stephanie and Melissa and Amy.
Where's the rest of the money?
It's in there.
Well, I just thought they're gonna get money and take off. Especially when they told us, all of you put your heads down.
The second gunman takes $4,000 from the safe.
Heads down. Heads
When
down.
he said that, I thought, these guys are leaving, so we did. And that's when I felt they had shot me in the head.
Get inside. Get in the corner.
Just seconds later, employee Stephen Turan arrived at the bowling alley with his 2 young children. Each person, adults and children, was shot in the head. Stephen, his 2 children, and Melissa's friend Amy were all killed by the robbers. Stephanie, Melissa, and the cook all survived this vicious attack.
We assessed the scene immediately. We canvassed the neighborhood, and thank God that we were able to come up with a couple of witnesses that were able to give us some pretty decent composites.
One of those was Stephanie's brother, who we'll call Michael. He had stopped by the bowling alley on his way to school.
I saw 2 Hispanic gentlemen walking from the back of the building towards the front. The older gentleman handed the younger gentleman a small case. The older gentleman squats down and looks right at me as I'm driving towards them. I took notice of what they were wearing, their descriptions, hair color, skin, eyes.
Based on eyewitness accounts, police drew up these composites of the killers. Suspect number 1 is Hispanic, 5 feet 10 and about 170 pounds. He speaks perfect English with no Spanish accent. Suspect number 2 is also Hispanic, 5 feet 7 and about 140 pounds. He speaks with a slight Spanish accent. If you can help solve these brutal murders, please log on to our website at unsolved.com.
Even among the most hardened criminals on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, Leo Koury stands out. His case file runs to an astonishing 38 volumes. Extortion, robbery, arson, fraud, racketeering, and murder were just tools of the trade for Leo Koury.
In Richmond, Virginia, hired gunmen killed a bodyguard named Chuck Kernigan and placed his body in a trunk. Police later discovered that the killers had driven the trunk to the Rappahannock River, weighed it down with a bumper from a 1957 Chevrolet, and threw it overboard. Kernigan's body was never found. Authorities believe that local businessman Leo Koury was responsible for this contract killing. This same Leo Koury was a volunteer softball umpire and active in his local church. He was married with 4 children and a member of the American Legion.
Leo was a nice guy to many people. There are people that are close to him that characterize him as a caring, sensitive individual. However, our investigation turned up another Leo Koury, and that is the leader of a racketeering enterprise who made a living committing crimes.
Koury was a fiercely competitive restaurant owner. He tried to force his rivals out of business by sending his thugs to terrorize their customers. One January night, Koury's gunmen attacked innocent customers at the Mailbox restaurant. 1 person died and several were injured. The FBI suspected Koury was responsible, but could not indict him because his inner circle was too loyal.
It became apparent after a few months of investigation that Leo Koury was the very center of a racketeering enterprise, and that means that he ran an organization that their primary income was through illegal purposes, be it frauds, extortion, murder, whatever, but their income was from crime.
I want you to kill a man for me.
In another incident, Koury asked one of his cohorts to kill a restaurant owner named Jim Hillier. A few days later, Koury's plan backfired when the gunman was caught outside Hillier's home. This arrest was the turning point for the FBI and directly led to Koury's indictment.
We later learned that he was there, allegedly at Leo Koury's behest, to kill Hillier, to eliminate Hillier as competition in the restaurant business.
Koury was charged with murder, attempted murder, extortion, assault, racketeering, fraud, and arson. But the day before he was to be arrested, Koury left town. Update. 13 years after Koury was indicted, a man calling himself William Franklin Biddle was admitted to a San Diego hospital. The next day, the man died of a brain hemorrhage. The hospital received a tip claiming that the man was actually Leo Koury. The FBI made a positive ID and finally closed a file on one of the most elusive fugitives in American history. Next, a woman is pulled from a fiery car crash and spends 15 years searching for her rescuers. Newport, Rhode Island.
Hi, Colleen.
This is Colleen Frangione. She's been paralyzed for more than 30 years. Colleen is a very special woman with a very simple message.
The rest of your lives. It's very simple. Buckle up. I didn't. It's my slogan, my
She
motto.
has spoken about driver safety to more than 10,000 high school and junior high school students. But driver safety isn't Colleen's only mission. She's also searching for two heroes, the men who pulled her from a burning car and from certain death. Colleen was 26 years old, recently divorced, and struggling to support two young sons. One night, she was driving home from an evening out. Just before 1 a.m. at a traffic light, Colleen came to a full stop. But the carload of teenagers behind her did not.
The hit of that second car just twisted me beyond the normal range. And that twist was so forceful that it broke two lower vertebrae and severed my spinal cord. And I'm glad I don't remember it.
As flames engulfed Colleen's car, Patty and Joe Trefero, who lived across the street, rushed to help.
No! The door's locked! The door's jammed, Joe! It won't open! Joe, it's stuck!
The fire was spreading really fast. The whole back of the car was on fire. The back seat was on fire. And as we were trying to pull open the doors, they wouldn't open because of the crash. They were jammed. And I heard in the background, get a crowbar.
I glanced over to my right, and there were two men standing there. My wife and I ran to our garage to get a crowbar. The time while we were gone, I believe either one or both of those gentlemen pulled Colleen from the car and brought her up onto the sidewalk. They were the only two I felt that were physically able to have gotten her out of the car at that point.
She's in shock. Guys, call 911 and get a blanket.
When we returned, there was a woman there, must have had some type of nursing background, that said that she was in shock to get her feet up. And shortly after that, the entire car was in flames.
While the fire was being put out, the two men who saved Colleen vanished. For 10 days, Colleen hovered between life and death. She awoke to the terrifying reality that she was paralyzed from the waist down.
Once I had to deal with not being able to walk, I was hurt. It was like I was heartbroken. That was my first feeling inside, you know. And then it went from that to how am I going to do everything that I never even thought about. Sitting up, putting a shoe on, getting dressed.
4 months later, Colleen was discharged from the hospital. She went on to raise 2 sons as a single parent and eventually married again. But not a day goes by that she doesn't think about the accident and the 2 men who saved her life.
How lucky only to be paralyzed. And now I'm saving lives because they pulled me from the car. I just believe we're all meant to meet. I would have been killed if it wasn't for you guys. And I want to thank you both, or just one of you, whichever one. So, and even if you can just give me a call, I would really appreciate it.
Update.
After this story aired, both of Colleen's rescuers called our phone center. They identify themselves as Ray Myers and Mike Kane.
Just a few days after Christmas, Colleen was finally able to meet her heroes. Ray Myers was the first to arrive.
It's incredible. That's how I feel about this whole thing. I think it's incredible.
Half an hour later, Mike Kane showed up.
Hi. Mike?
Mike,
oh, gosh, how nice to meet you. Thank you so
No
much.
surprise, why 15 years later,
I tried to imagine what you looked like.
why, why?
I do that when I don't know.
But when she said she wanted to thank the people, after I spoke to her on the phone, it was like, this lady is really sincere, and that's what she wanted. She wanted to thank us.
What's your name that was in the new book? I feel the whole circle, it's all completed. All the pieces of the puzzle
How did I get your number?
are all put together now. And it's a real peaceful feeling inside. That's, to me, and in fact, how many times have I said in the last 2 weeks, how many people get to meet their guardian angels? And this is how I feel.
Next, do you believe in angels? 2 women claim a heavenly messenger saved them from certain death. Painted Desert, Arizona. Janie Shammo is one of those who believe that angels watch over us all the time. When Janie was 14, she was vacationing with her brother and sister-in-law in Arizona.
I had gotten a new camera for the trip, and I was curious to get some good photographs, and I can remember leaning up against the guardrail, focusing the camera, and thinking, if I just got on the other side of this guardrail down there a little bit, it would be a much better photograph.
At that same moment, Janie's mother, Shirley, who had stayed home in Michigan, was sitting down to read her Bible as she did every day.
I really felt that I was led by the Holy Spirit to read Psalm 91. And I began sobbing, just sobbing, because I knew Janie was going to die. I didn't know why or how, but I knew she was going to die.
Alfred! Alfred! Janie's falling! Janie! She's gone over the edge!
Suddenly, I just stopped. And I can remember thinking, I'm so glad I stopped, and thinking, what stopped me? I was afraid. I was scared that there was no way I was going to get back up to the top. I could not see the top. I couldn't hear my family yelling for me. I knew I had to be very careful or I would start falling again.
As soon as I had this feeling that Janie was going to die, I began pleading with the Lord to please don't let her die. And there would be more than what I could bear. I continued to read Psalm 91. It said, "And he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. And they shall bear thee up in their hands, lest your foot dash against a stone." And then a peace just came over me, because I believed it.
Janie? Alfred, it's Janie! You're all right.
Oh, Janie, what happened?
I don't know. I fell a long ways. I don't even remember coming back up. Oh, well.
I know I did not climb up myself. Something strange had happened, but I just kind of was glad I was back up there. And
we had talked among ourselves about calling her mother, and we decided that she could call her mother, but not to say anything about her fall, mainly because we didn't want to upset Shirley and we were so far away from home.
Tell me all about your trip.
Well, Mommy should have been there and seen all the things.
But once Janie was back home in Michigan, the story came out.
And here's where I stepped over the guardrail and I fell down the slope.
You what?
Well, I just wanted to get a better picture, so I
When
climbed over the
Janie
rail.
was telling her story, I realized the whole magnitude of what had happened to me. Then I knew that verses 11 and 12, that the angels should bear thee up in their hands, lest your foot dash against a stone. That they were the ones that brought her back to the top.
when I heard my mother's story of what had happened that day and her feelings that I was going to die, I realized then that it was her prayers that had sent the angels that had made me stop and had brought me to the top of the canyon.
Oh, well, at least you're all right. Oh.
Janie Shamo isn't the only one to report the intervention of a guardian angel. In another account, a woman named Estella Vera claims that she actually saw the angel who helped her.
Riverside, California. On a Saturday afternoon, Estella Vera and her two grown children were on their way home when they saw an ice cream truck being robbed. While Estella's daughter ran to call the police, her son rushed to help the truck driver. He and another man were already fighting a large, muscle-bound assailant.
I knew there was absolutely nothing I could do, and I saw my mother in the path of his van. I knew she was in between the two, so I think instantly I thought she was dead.
Estella's left leg had been severed below the knee, and she had suffered a heart attack. But somehow, she clung to life.
The first time I saw my mother after the incident, I could not recognize her. Her face was completely swollen, and we were just waiting for any word whether or not she would even survive.
Estella drifted in and out of consciousness for the next several days. Finally, she woke up.
He's okay, he's right here.
It's good to hear your voice, Mama. Did you see the man by the truck? Don't worry, Mama, he's in jail.
No, the other man, surrounded by light, in front of the truck.
Was this some dream?
My father and I looked at each other kind of puzzled, and possibly looking at her as if she may have dreamt something within the time of she was in the hospital.
But Estella insisted that she had not been dreaming. The story she tells is truly astonishing.
remember is looking at the truck coming so fast, and just with all my heart, I said to God, God, please don't let me die. And then I started reciting Psalms that I know. I said, the angel of the Lord takes care of those that loves him. And I look again, and now in front of the truck, there is this beautiful person. He looks so peaceful, so beautiful. He has the most beautiful smile. You could see him like in slow motion. Immediately, I forgot about the ice cream truck. I forgot about everything that was happening. All I remember was this beautiful face, and then I grabbed his hand. I put my face over his hand, and I would go like this. And I remember a couple of times I opened my eyes to look at his face to be sure that he was there. And I could see him right over here looking at me with a big smile.
I believed her. She was very sincere, very excited, very sure of the fact that the angel was there.
Estella has no doubt that she is alive today because she was visited by her guardian angel.
I cannot really explain this beautiful experience. I have no doubt in my heart that God sent an angel to save me. I ask everyone, if they saw this beautiful person pulling me to the side and helping me, nobody knew what I was talking about. But I knew that it was true, that God sent an angel to save me.